This video is designed to review with you changes in the market for loanable funds. Anytime the behavior of either suppliers or demanders of loanable funds change, there will be an impact on the real interest rate. Let's look first at changes in the behavior of suppliers of loanable funds. Suppliers of loanable funds are savers, and the two primary savers are American citizens who do not spend all of their disposable income and make those monies available for others to borrow, and foreign citizens who likewise don't spend all their disposable income and bring their savings to America. If the supply of loanable funds were to increase, we simply draw a new supply line to the right, indicate by notation and an arrow that the line has shifted right, and note then the impact on the real interest rate. Notice the real interest rate falls with a rightward shift in the supply of loanable funds. A rightward shift would result when either American or foreign savers decided to save more. So an example might be if the United States government decided to reduce Social Security payments, American citizens would be forced to save more for their own retirement. If American consumers had a very pessimistic attitude about future employment, they may choose to save more now in preparation for a job loss. If foreign savers were pessimistic about conditions in their own country and felt their savings would be safer in America, they may choose to save more here. In all three of those examples, people are changing their behavior by deciding to save more, resulting in a rightward shift in the supply of loanable funds, and thereby a decrease in the real interest rate. The flip would occur if people decided to save less. Saving less would be represented by a supply shift to the left, indicated by proper notation and an arrow. This would result in an increase in the real interest rate. The shift left would occur if savers decided to save less. So perhaps there was growing optimism in the American population about future business conditions. Perhaps there was a booming housing market or a booming stock market, which led people to spend more of their disposable income and thereby save less. Perhaps people were feeling so good about life that their attitudes towards savings changed, and they felt savings was no longer as important. Foreign savers, who perhaps before were fearful about conditions in their own country, were reassured and began bringing their savings home. In all of those examples, savings would be reduced, resulting in a leftward shift in the supply of loanable funds and an increase in the real interest rate. Now let's go back to our original equilibrium and look at some possible changes in the demand for loanable funds. Demanders of loanable funds are borrowers. So anytime borrowers express the desire to borrow more funds or fewer funds at all interest rates, the demand for loanable funds line would shift, thereby changing the real interest rate. Remember, the primary demanders of loanable funds are businesses and the American government. So let's say that the U.S. government increased their borrowing because of increasingly large deficits. This would shift the demand for loanable funds to the right, and thereby increase the real interest rate. This could also occur if businesses were optimistic about the future and decided to borrow more to purchase new machines, tools, or equipment, or to construct new factories. An increase in the demand for loanable funds results in a rightward shift and an increase in the real interest rate. Be particularly aware that the most commonly asked question in the market for loanable funds involves a rightward shift in demand. And the cause of that rightward shift is government borrowing. So government borrowing increases demand, which drives up the real interest rate. If governments decided to borrow less, perhaps because they shrank their budget deficit, or businesses decided to borrow less, perhaps because they were pessimistic about the future, the demand for loanable funds would shift left, and the real interest rate would thereby fall. So in conclusion, when given a graph on the market for loanable funds and a change in the behavior of either savers or borrowers, always begin with our basic equilibrium. Determine if the question is indicating a change in the behavior of savers, which would shift the supply line, or if it's indicating a change in the behavior of borrowers, which would shift the demand line. Shift the line appropriately to the right for an increase, to the left for a decrease, and then be sure to note the impact on the real interest rate. This is one of the most frequently asked questions on the AP macro exam, and in the past few years has been asked almost every year, both in the multiple choice section and in the free response. The market for loanable funds and the graph that goes with it is a definite must to be successful on the AP macro test.